Good afternoon. This is Kathy Betcher, and I'm with Deb Davies. I'm here in Illinois, and she's down in Missouri. We're going to try and get a good recording of an interview with Deb on self-carriage and what exactly that means when it comes to horses. Deb is a certified quantum energetics practitioner, and she's completed equine osteopathic school as well. She is also a connected riding senior instructor for and has been with Connected Riding for 25 years. She's an independent professor for Wisdom University, and last year she was granted an honorary PhD from the International Academy of Energy Medicine. So she has quite a background in horses and the biomechanics and how their body works, and I feel is an expert on what self-carriage is and how to obtain it. But Deb, first, can you tell us why you picked connected riding?
Well, hi, Kathy. Yes, thank you for that introduction. I do have to say that when I look at the horse as a whole, I realize how little we know because there is so much to know. So I appreciate your words of expertise, but I have to come to the table with humility, saying that I feel so far from being an expert on it, and I'm just honored to be a teacher of the horse, a student of the horse, I should say, because everything I have learned, I've learned from them. So I will bring to the table as much as I can share with you about a different understanding I have of self-carriage this time around as it relates to the What is Self-Carriage workshop that is up and coming. So Kathy, I have been writing for many years, and ever since a child, have been looking for an instructor that could translate to me exactly what it was I needed to do in order to feel what I knew I was capable of feeling. And Peggy Cummings was one of the very first teachers that was able to translate information to me about my body and about the body of the horse that allowed me to actually feel the horse in a way I had been searching for years and years and years. I have been blessed to have many amazing teachers from Europe and Great Britain and even here in the United States, and was classically trained by some very, very fine masters and riders. But what was missing for me was I would look at some of these riders and see a fluidity and see a brilliance in their riding that I could not get myself through their instruction. So somewhere along the line, there wasn't the interpretation, there wasn't the ability for some of these great writers to actually translate what it was they were wanting me to do. And as I look back on my time working with Peggy over the years, I realized it's not just about the translation, but it was about Peggy's ability to understand the human body in relationship to the equine body and put the two together so that the horse and rider can establish the primary function of union, which is a fundamental balance of fluidity and ease. And so when I first rode with Peggy, I found that for the very first time in all of my years as a competitive rider. And I actually cried in my very first lesson, and many since then with Peggy, of course, but because I had a feeling through my body and through my horse that I had never experienced before. And that's why I chose connected riding, because in that moment, I knew this woman had the answers to helping riders discover what they needed to do with their body. And she knew the horses so well that she would be able to fine-tune a rider's body with the horse, teach a rider how to understand neutral pelvis, and teach a rider how to support a horse in its natural balance. And I do believe that this is how we should be teaching new riders and instructors throughout the world. Connected riding is not just another modality, if you will, or a style of riding. Connected riding is actually the foundation, I believe, to all disciplines of riding, because if you don't have neutral pelvis and you don't have an understanding of how a horse needs to carry a rider and have its own weight-bearing posture, then I believe right from the beginning we're gonna find difficulties not only in the horse's ability to move with us, but in our own ability of us as riders and our own body ability to sustain riding without discomfort, pain, and tension. So anyway, that is why I chose connected riding. To me, it's the foundation for all riding.
Well, I haven't been exposed to as many disciplines as you have over the years, but I do know that I had gotten to a point in my own body where if I rode for more than 45 minutes, I was in pain. So working with Peggy and learning about neutral definitely has changed that. I'm back to where I can trail ride all day long and still walk when I get down. So I have to agree with you that finding neutral while you're riding is so important. And I hope more and more people keep getting exposed to it. So we're here to talk about a horse obtaining self-carriage. How would you define self-carriage?
Well, how I would define it today, sitting here right now, Kathy, is it's a muscular sequence of movement stimulated by a neurologic response through the horse, where certain sets of muscles are stimulated and activated by a previous set, and then a next set is sequentially stimulated until the whole system of the horse is being sequentially stimulated through a set of neurologic responses. And each muscle that is induced is then correctly stimulating the movement of the horse. Now, I know that sounds a little more technical, but to me, for so many years, I used the terms self-carriage without really thinking about it. And I do think that in our industry, that term is spoken a lot without riders necessarily understanding what it really is. I do believe we have a visual idea of what we would like to see the horse look like in self-carriage. Perhaps even some people have an idea of what they would like to feel underneath their seat and in their hand in self-carriage. But there are, I believe, a lot of misconceptions about how it is created. And that is what I'm interested in sharing, is how does one actually get self-carriage? Not necessarily just what is it, how is the horse able to produce it? And in order to really understand that, one has to understand a little bit, even just at the basic level, of which muscles have to work in order for the next set to work, and the next set to work, and the next set to work. And a rider must have a basic understanding of what it feels like if there are a certain set of muscles that actually aren't working correctly, because then the horse is going to compensate, and then you get all kinds of stiffness and bracing patterns set up. So my definition of self-carriage, to come back to your question again, is an understanding of the muscular sequencing in a horse that creates movement. I like to use an analogy of going to the gym or having a personal trainer. And if I go to a personal trainer, I would expect that personal trainer to know the muscles that she or he is inviting me to work with, what sets of weights or what equipment they are having me utilize on that particular day. They need to know why they are strengthening those parts of my body and how those parts of my body are going to relate to other parts of my body. They need to understand how to train those muscles correctly so that they're not overtraining them and so that they're not undertraining them, and that I can get a balance throughout my whole entire system so that during the course of, let's say, a week, my personal trainer is going to support my postural muscles and my locomotion muscles and do that in a balanced way so at the end of the week, I don't have one specific muscle set that's completely fatigued and exhausted and worn out. So if I have a personal trainer, I expect that trainer to know the links between those muscles. I expect them to know what locomotion muscles are and what postural muscles are and where I'm weak and where I'm strong. And I should honestly say that I really feel that as trainers and teachers, we need to have an understanding of that in the horses if we're going out and teaching people how to ride, because self-carriage in a horse is so important to his health and well-being. So I'm really on a push to support trainers because they do an amazing job, but I would like to invite them to say, hey, let's look a little deeper about what we're teaching and how we are supporting these horses and understanding what really is self-carriage and how can we teach our children, our beginners, our novice, and our advanced riders how to feel and how to notice when their horses are actually utilizing correct muscles that will enhance the self-carriage of a horse.
That is an awesome goal. And I know I am so excited that I get the opportunity to start learning this with your guidance because my horses are important to me and I do want them to last for the long term. You mentioned that there's a lot of misconception of self-carriage. What would you say is the biggest misconception people have about self-carriage?
And again, and this is just my opinion, but it would seem to me that I would say there's two: the placement of the horse's head and the ability or lack thereof of a horse to quote unquote track up. I, for one, years ago, when I knew a whole lot less than I do now, and I have to say that I hope in another few years I know a whole lot more than I do now. But I used to think that if a horse tracked up with his hind end and his hind footfall fell in the position of his front footfalls, footstep, that he was actually engaged and that he had self-carriage. Of course, subsequently, I've learned so much more and realized that is not true at all, because a horse can be a leg mover and swing his limbs and have quite an arc of movement from a hind end swing of that arc through his sequencing, and that foot can far overstep the front foot. However, it does not mean at all that he is using one iota of correct self-carriage muscles in those hindquarters. He can just be swinging through his hip joint. He can just be swinging that leg. So I think that's one big misconception, is that if a horse is tracking up, he's in self-carriage. And I would say, no, that's not true. And I would say to people, do you even know the difference between a horse that's actually moving through his back as a back mover or versus a horse that's a leg mover? And I think that's something that's really important to help people learn. And the other misconception is the position of the head. And every discipline has an idea of what the correct head and neck carriage should look like. And I see a lot of pictures across the board of disciplines. I'm not going to pick out one discipline, but across the board, I see a lot of pictures of horses with different head sets and head carriages, and people posting on social media or articles written about these headsets. Well, that horse looks great. There's no stress in his neck, blah, blah, blah. And when I look at that picture, all I see is compression in the spine, compression in the neck. I see the horse breaking over in a place in his cervical vertebrae that is incorrect. I see stress through the horse's jaw. I see him hyperflexed, counterflexed, all kinds of incorrect biomechanical movements, if you will, that are being called correct. So I really think that as riders, trainers, and just horsemen, we really have to learn a whole lot more about the hind end and the front end and how the two come together through the bridge of the back. And I have to say, I am a work in progress. I am learning, and I can't sit here and claim to say I know all the answers to this, but I sure know a little bit than I did this time last year, a little bit more. And as I said, I'm going to continue to learn more so we can continue to advocate for our horses and support trainers and riders.
So having a horse learn to use its muscles properly to be able to develop self-carriage. Can a horse learn that with a rider, or does that need to be something they learn from the ground first?
I really think, Kathy, that it needs to be something that is initiated from the ground first. And I'm making a generalized statement here. Excuse me. If you take a young horse, for example, it's so incredibly important that the young horse be taught to have a weight-bearing posture. My friend and colleague Gillian Cranbring speaks of this and is very knowledgeable on this. A horse is not born with weight-bearing posture. It's something that has to be learned. And they don't need it in the wild because they don't have to carry us. But in order to carry us, they have to have a leg in each corner. They have to have strong postural tone to not only support themselves, but to support the weight of us on top of them. And so in a young horse, I believe starting a horse on the ground to teach them weight-bearing posture is the most important thing we can do. And that can be started early on in their career. I mean, that can be started when they're when they're babies, just doing a little bit of groundwork on the ground. You're not asking them for any pressure, but you're just correcting the patterns that they were born into. Every horse is going to be born with a crooked pattern, and then he's going to have either be right-handed or left-handed, just like we are. And if we can start to support that horse in the best possible way to learn how to be straight and to have weight-bearing posture, then by the time it comes to his 5 or 6 year old year, where you start backing them, and I notice I say 5 or 6, perhaps 4 or 5, but I'm a big advocate on not getting on horses when they're 2 and 3 years old, but that's a whole nother topic. But nevertheless, I think that you should start it on the ground. I get a lot of horses in training that do not have weight-bearing posture, that are perhaps competing at really high levels, but they are so out of balance and they don't have self-carriage. They're extremely crooked. And the first thing I do is I spend 2 or 3 weeks just working with them on the ground to redefine what weight-bearing posture is and to support that horse on the ground to help change his muscle memory and help him restore his own internal balance from the inside out before I then get back on him. So I would say it's really beneficial, Kathy, to start them on the ground. And even with horses that are going under saddle, I do groundwork with my horses every day. I do connected riding, connected groundwork, because that is one of the very powerful modalities that helps support a horse with weight-bearing posture and therefore owning its muscular system so it can be in self-carriage.
Okay. In your work with all the horses you get exposed to, have you found that conformation of the horse has an impact on their ability to find self-carriage? Or can every horse develop self-carriage?
I believe every horse can develop self-carriage to the ability that his conformation allows.
Okay.
Certainly, excuse me, there are horses that have very, very poor conformation. Maybe they have super long backs and super short necks and super long angles from their femur to their hocks. And you look at the animal and you think, oh my, this poor little guy was kind of at the end of the list when he got his back or his femur or this or that. However, that being said, every horse has the same postural muscles. Every horse has the same muscles, whether they have good conformation or bad conformation. And so how we choose to access the horse from the inside out and support those postural muscles and those locomotion muscles has a huge amount to do with how successful they are going to be in developing their own ability of self-carriage based on their conformation. So yes, every horse can have self-carriage, but it certainly is dependent upon their conformation, but it doesn't mean it cannot be attained.
Okay.
You may have to work a little harder. I had a horse, an event horse, with a super, super long back. And I had to do my due diligence with this little guy to keep him, to keep his postural muscles, because he is going to have he had a compensation pattern of dropping out in his loins and not coiling the loins because he had a super long back. So if I did not keep his postural muscles even more strong than perhaps I would on a horse that was shorter backed, and helped him constantly by doing groundwork and working him over poles, selecting exercises for his specific body that helped him maintain his self-carriage and his posture. If I wasn't able to do that, he would not have been able to compete at the levels he competed at. So it does sometimes take a little bit more work and understanding, but yes, every horse can achieve a degree of self-carriage.
Well, that's good to know. So you mentioned at one point that helping them develop self-carriage was important for their long-term health. In what way does using their body properly when being ridden help maintain long-term health?
Well, the spinal cord of your horse, of course, goes through the thoracic lumbar vertebrae. And if a horse does not have strong postural muscle and a correct application of movement through his longissimus dorsi muscle, what happens then is the horse, when you're riding him, is no longer carrying you on his muscular system, through his back. He's actually carrying you through his vertebral system. So your weight is then affecting his spine. And through that spine runs his spinal cord. Through each of those vertebrae runs his spinal cord. And so if you're sitting on a spine, on his vertebrae, and he is not able to hold you with the postural back muscle because he doesn't have any, then he starts to get concavity through those through that spine. You start to create compression through the thoracic and lumbar vertebrae. And because out of each of those vertebrae come nerves, and each of those nerves from each of those vertebrae have a job to do relative to a certain organ or a certain circulatory function. And so if you're sitting on a spine and compressing it, and the nerves coming out of that spine are being compressed because you're sitting on the spine, then the innervation of that nerve is going to be compromised. And whatever organ or system that nerve goes to will also eventually become more compromised. And that is the beginning of a pathology. So correct posture in a riding horse therefore becomes paramount to their longevity and to the health and function of their organs. Never mind their brain and the nervous system and their balance of parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, to their digestive system, to the feet, to the teeth. I mean, it really escalates. We talk a little bit about this in some of my lectures that I have, including the equine nervous system lecture, which actually goes into a little bit more depth about that. But even in our What is Self-Carriage workshop, we do address the importance of that relative to the horse's overall health and well-being. We don't want to create pathology in our horses because we don't have the knowledge of how a horse should be carrying himself. Let's just amp up our ability to teach and learn so people have a little bit more knowledge, and we can perhaps prevent pathologies just because we're educating people in a little bit of a out-of-the-box way.
So that I'm going to guess from what you've just said that even if a horse does learn to the proper self-carriage and how to carry a rider properly, if the rider hasn't learned about being in neutral pelvis and being live weight, we can destroy that ability, correct?
We can, Kathy, we can, yeah. Because certainly dead weight, within moments, the horse is going to fatigue with the dead weight of a rider. I use an equivalent of actually water skiing. If you are dead weight on a horse, you can be like someone that's water skiing, and that horse is having to drag your weight around. So he's putting all his effort in just trying to find his balance with you up there out of balance. So it's much more difficult for him to stay in neutral posture himself. And what happens then is he begins to compensate. We begin to shut down that spinal system, the muscular system that I spoke to at the beginning, starts to get fatigued and shuts down, and then we start to get our horses developing on the forehand patterns and different compensation patterns and different asymmetrical patterns. And so then, compensation leads to tension and stress, and then stress and tension leads to bracing, and bracing leads to more compensation. So indeed, if we're not aware of our own posture, we can certainly affect the overall mechanics and postural health of our horse.
Okay. So you, because of your knowledge and your work with horse, you have gone ahead and put together this 2-day clinic to help people understand, visually see some changes that can be made to help horses attain self-carriage. Can you give us an idea of what the agenda is for each day of a clinic if somebody is looking to get more knowledge and looking into going to one of your clinics? What can they expect?
Well, Kathy, we begin usually with a PowerPoint so that we can go through some of the fundamental principles of understanding what I believe self-carriage is, which is what we stated in the first interview question. So I go through and share with people some of the muscle sequencing. And a lot of the muscles that we will talk about are familiar with people, but they're very important to understand how they relate to the next group of muscles. So we spent a little bit of time going through an understanding of how that actually works. I paint a horse so that we can have some of the self-carriage muscles that we're looking at actually visible on a horse, so we can take the horse to the arena and have him move and have people notice if these muscles are sequencing in the correct way. It may sound like it's quite detailed, and in some degrees it is, but I will tell you that I have done this workshop, modified it a little bit, but I've done it for Pony Club kids because it's so important that our kids learn this stuff. So please don't be put off if you don't know muscles. It's not about knowing all these amazing muscles. It's just about understanding what to look for. And so it's very simplified and put out in terms that anybody can really understand. And then we go back, and I do have a lot of different pictures on the PowerPoint of what self-carriage should look like, both in English and Western, and what it doesn't look like. So I'm looking to help develop people's eyes. So I want to, number one, inform them intellectually and build upon some of the skills, teach them some things about the horses that they don't understand or they don't know yet, so that they come away more educated. Then give them the visual and the hands-on with the practical, and then start to develop the eye. Then in the afternoon, we go out and we work with horses in hand, and we work on some exercise which actually support the horses to develop their self-carriage muscles, because it's very important that people have something that they can go home and apply to their own horses, that they can go home and look at their horses and take this information from the clinic back to their barns and use it for themselves and share it with other people. So I want people to go home after the 2 days with more information, number one, so that they feel they really have a more in-depth understanding of the importance of self-carriage. Number two, a visual, so they can look and take a look at their horses and say, wow, I don't quite remember what that muscle was, but it sure doesn't look like it's moving the way it should do. Even just that awareness is huge. Number three, to be able to utilize exercises to help turn on muscles that aren't actually functioning correctly. And then number four, under saddle, to be able to feel some of the differences between a horse that is using himself correctly and a horse that's not using himself correctly. Now, in these clinics, we don't usually get a horse that's 100% in self-carriage, but as the participants begin to have hands-on work with their horses, and I give them a select group of exercises that are actually relevant to their particular situation with their horse, they start to feel some things click into place that perhaps they haven't felt before. So I'm interested in people having a feeling, not just giving them a technique. I want them to feel, because if they can feel something and they know how they got to that feeling, then they can duplicate it. And so that's basically what you can expect over the 2-day workshop.
Okay, on day 2, then, is it a continuation of the in-hand work? Is that how the day starts?
Yes, day 2. Yeah, day 2, we always have a little check-in, and there's usually a little bit more PowerPoint to go through. And we have questions and answers from the day before. And then we go back out, and day 2, we spend more time in the barn, in the arena, doing the groundwork and riding to support the lecture work that we had done on day 1. So day 1 is generally lecture and hands-on with the painted horse and groundwork. And then day 2 is a little bit of lecture, more hands-on, and riding.
Okay. So is a person, will they be able to develop a feel for when their horse is in self-carriage while they're riding? Is that a feeling that you can describe?
Well, I guess if I was to describe it, it would be ease, effortlessness, and fluidity. That I get on. And incidentally, I think that self-carriage continues to be a working process for more horses, for all horses, because they're quadrupeds and they're horses and they go and they run and they play and they have bracing patterns and they have tension patterns. And the key to continuing to improve self-carriage is our awareness of, whoops, today my horse is a little braced here, or he's a little crooked here, or he's a little tense here, or he's not picking up that inside hind leg. And instead of just going after it as a training problem, which is how I used to address everything, it's a training problem, so I used to push the training. Now I have more knowledge thanks to some brilliant teachers in my world, and I really owe a lot of this to Yannick Vlugin, who I studied under at the Vlugin Institute of Osteopathic Medicine. He is an amazing teacher, and I learned so much from him about the movement of a horse and how it relates to the internal workings of the horse. So I really owe him a lot, and I'm a great advocate of his work. But anyway, we really have to continue to be aware of what our horse is doing in space and time at every moment. So it's really difficult to have somebody that's never felt self-carriage in a horse feel it or have an idea of what it's supposed to feel like, which is why I like to make sure that when I have a rider in a session, whether it's a clinic or whether it's in a workshop or a lesson, that they go away with, even if it's just one different feel, they have to go away with a different feel. Because if you add one different feel today and then tomorrow another different feel, and then you gradually build, you become more aware of what it is you're looking for underneath you. So for me, if I get on a horse that's in pure self-carriage, and I guess I don't even know if I ever have. I mean, I've sat on some amazing schoolmasters that are just fluid and light, and their back is up, and the movement just comes through you like it's just a wave, and it's just ease and effortlessness. And it's like you're riding this beautiful uphill motion, and your body just vibrates with that motion. And you just almost have to think the movement or think the rotation, and the horse is able to execute the movement. So, I mean, that is the feeling of it. And again, I do want to reiterate that my goal with every student is to give them a feeling on their horses that they have never had before. It doesn't matter how big or how small. I don't have any illusion that I can teach a horse or a rider to go into self-carriage in a clinic.
Right.
That's not even a realistic goal, okay? But can I give you a little piece of knowledge, and can I give you something different that you may need to support your horse with under saddle that he will respond to immediately so that you can have that feel? Yes, I believe I can give you that piece. And you can say, oh, that's what that piece feels like. And so that's my goal, is piece by piece to build this beautiful locomotion through these noble animals that have so much power, and to help you understand actually what it is you're doing and how to support them to get there with ease and effortlessness and without creating negative impact on their body.
And I believe you can do that. I've watched you teach a number of people, and I've gotten blessed with having some lessons with you, and I learned something every single time. And I'm just so excited. You mentioned about your osteopathic training. That's been a fairly recent accomplishment in your life, correct?
Well, yes, I decided to go to osteopathic school in 2009 because I wanted to learn more about the horses from the inside out. That's always been my nature ever since I was a junior rider growing up in England. I wanted to know emotionally how they worked from the inside out. I wanted to know physiologically, physically, neurologically. I wanted to know, and I still do, I want to know everything about them from the inside out, because I believe that's how horses learn, and that's how we can support a horse, by teaching them and learning from them too, from the inside out. So yes, I never went to school to become an osteopath. I do not call myself an osteopath. I went through the training to learn the osteopathic teachings. And the osteopathic teachings were basically how the horse works. You know, Yannick Vlugin has put together this most amazing course to produce osteopaths, of which, as I say, I'm not an osteopath, but this course is designed to teach you how it all connects together. You know, how the front limb connects to the neck, to connects to the organs of the pelvis, and how it is all so intricately connected together. And it was a 3 years of studying that I did, and I want to continue to do with him. But I have to say, it absolutely changed how I looked at a horse. And I can't ever just look at a horse anymore and just see, well, of course, I see the beautiful, noble horse, but what I see underneath is the skeleton and the ligaments and the tendons and the organs. And I see what should be working when it isn't, and I see what is working and what, and I'm constantly developing my eye, but it's had a definite impact on how I ride and teach, because now I have more awareness that not everything is a training problem. And so when you have that awareness, you can actually make changes on the horse, to the horse, that are not necessarily through training more, but having the riders do different types of movements that support the horse functionally.
So you said it has had a definite impact on how you ride and how you teach riding now. Is there a way to in just a few sentences kind of comment on that, on what the changes are that you've made?
Well, I think I said it, Kathy. I think, I look at the parts. A horse has to move his body. There's a certain way that the body has to move. There's a certain way that locomotion has to happen through the system. There's a certain way that the spine should move, and the neck should move, and the joints should move. And so I look when I'm teaching to see if that's happening. I look when I'm teaching to see if there's a part of that horse that should be moving that isn't moving. And if it isn't moving, then one isn't going to get the movements that you're looking for in a training session per se, or the rider isn't going to accomplish a goal that they're looking to accomplish if there's a part of a horse that should be moving that isn't moving. All that's going to happen is, if we do like I used to do and just kind of push through because it's a training problem and I didn't know any better, we would just set up more compensation problems and more stiffnesses. So that's what I do differently now, is I can address the part of the horse that isn't moving by giving the rider some some functional movements to do under saddle with their horses, and even groundwork on the ground to support that part of the horse that isn't moving. And I can also educate the person to say, if there is an issue with this horse, that perhaps you need to contact your veterinarian or your osteopathic vet to actually get some support so you can get the system moving again, so that he can do exactly what it is you want him to do. Because again, if he's not functional in his movement patterns, then that is that is potentially a precursor to pathology.
I do have one other question I'd like to ask you. I live in an area, and my barn specifically is mainly a pleasure riding barn, trail riders. And I know one of my frustrations when I talk to people about learning more about the horse from the inside out, I just trail ride. And in my opinion, trail riding is just as important of a discipline as any other out there. The horse is trying to deal with carrying a rider over different types of terrain, up and down hills, over logs, through water, whatever they're exposed to. So, in your opinion, does it benefit a trail horse to have a rider that is more knowledgeable about the workings of the horse from the inside out?
Absolutely, Kathy. I could not agree more. In fact, I would almost say it's more important, but I can't say that because that's not true. But it is fundamentally important because of all the things you're saying. First of all, people that trail ride, number one, safety is a huge concern. You're out there in the middle of nowhere, and you are on different terrain. And so if you have a horse that is not posturally fit, that doesn't know how to carry himself correctly, and he gets fatigued because he's not posturally fit, because the rider doesn't understand some very basic little things they could do to increase the posture of their horses. So you have a horse that's out there, that he's getting tired, you've been out for 4 hours, maybe you get lost, maybe you decide it's a beautiful day, you're going to go a bit further, all kinds of maybes. And that horse gets fatigued. Well, number one, if you have a little bit more knowledge than the person before you, and you've done a little bit extra work on that horse and a little bit extra groundwork, or just even spend an extra 10 minutes a day doing something to support that horse's core, then you can go out and you can go that extra hour without that horse getting fatigued. Because if he gets fatigued, he's got more chances of falling, losing his balance, getting disconnected through his body. When a horse is disconnected through the body and out of balance, they get more spooky because they're tired and they don't know where their hind is. Okay, they drop out through their back because suddenly they can't carry you anymore. They're exhausted. They're on the forehand. They don't know where their hind end is. And suddenly that little rattle in the leaves, or, the motorbike that swings by that normally isn't an issue, can become an issue because the horse is disconnected. When a horse is disconnected from the front end to the back end, it installs and it heightens their fright and flight response. So suddenly something that may not spook them suddenly is spooky because they're tired and they don't know where their hind end is. So their nervous system is actually what we call above its normal base activity. It's on a little bit of high alert. Now, if you as a trail rider know this information, you can prevent it from happening by doing 5 or 10 minutes worth of select little pieces of work beforehand. But if you just say, oh, I'm just a trail rider, and nobody is just anything. If you own a horse, you have a great responsibility, whether you are just feeding that horse in the backyard or going on trail rides or competing at the Olympics. That animal's body is the same. And really, it serves you and that horse to educate yourself just a little bit more and a little bit more. So number one, they can be healthy, that they can go on and have longevity and not get hurt and injured, because that's the next thing that happens when a horse gets fatigued. And people say, well, I only ride once a week for 8 hours. It's like, oh my gosh, so the rest of the time that horse sits in his field without any postural support, and then you get on him and he's not really posturally strong, and he's really not equipped to carry you for 8 hours at that point. And especially if you haven't taken a little bit of time to find out about your own neutral pelvis. So, then you take your horse out and he can get hurt. So, there's a whole escapade of sequences that can unfold if we just get stuck a little bit in our egos and say, well, I'm just this, or I'm just a backyard person, or I'm just this. No, you own a horse. You are an important part of that horse's life. You are an important part of the equine community. And if you can learn 5 minutes more of something, you can teach somebody else and perhaps prevent somebody else from having an injury or having their horses get hurt. So please, people, give yourself a pat on the back and step into the humility of letting these horses teach us so that they can be better, you can be better, and we can all really enjoy whatever discipline it is we want to enjoy with these beautiful horses.
Well, Deb, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this interview. And I really hope it will encourage people to participate in a clinic when there's one available in their area, or to contact you to host a clinic so that they can start learning some of this information. How do you feel is the best way for people to find out where you will be running these clinics, or how to contact you for further information? What's the best way people can get at this information?
Well, Kathy, if people go to my website at equineselfexpression.com, my calendar of events is posted for the year on that website, as well as all of the different workshops and lectures that I do host. And then if people want to contact, they can contact my manager through the email on that website for further information or to reach me. So there's plenty of ways that people can become informed, and the best way would be to go to my website. Again, that's www.equineselfexpression.com.
Great. Thanks again, Deb, and I look forward to seeing you soon.